This is the second of a series of podcasts focusing on each of the 5 different types of questions you get for the Impact of War on Britain paper. This is about question 2, which is the question that focuses on the purpose of a source, or the purpose of a representation. The typical wording of the question for question 2 is, what was the purpose of this representation? So I will take you through the writing frames, how to structure your answer, learn this structure by heart, and you will almost certainly find that you can adapt it for any question on any source that you get in the examination. So here we go. This particular example, as you can see, and I'll zoom in just quickly for you to have a look at the source, focuses on a very famous propaganda poster. So in this particular paper it was source B. As you can see, it's a poster produced by the government's War Propaganda Bureau at the start of the war. Now, obviously that's World War I. I would hope that will be obvious to you. Remember, in the examination you're given a little bit of blurb at the beginning that tells you what all the sources are about. They're all on a particular theme. This particular paper was about World War I, propaganda during World War I. The question is, what was the purpose of this representation? Now, it's worth 8 marks, 1.5 minutes per mark. You've got to write for 12 minutes on that. Many candidates just launch their way in, they don't think through a structure, and what comes out is what you call a stream of consciousness, and they end up just repeating the same point, lack structure, and they get very, very few marks. So what you've got to remember is a 3-paragraph approach to this particular question will nearly always work. And I'm going to use 2 examples. Okay, so this first example, have a quick look at that so you can immediately see there are 3 paragraphs. Now, before we look at the content of the paragraph, let's just highlight what these points are. Okay, so what paragraph 1 does, the first paragraph, is it shows knowledge. It's really, really important. Once you get past question 1 and you get into questions 2 onwards, they are expecting you to show knowledge. So this is about, the question is about women and propaganda in World War I. Secondly, the key focus of the second paragraph is what is the message and how is the message put across. Try to learn those question words, what and how. And then the third paragraph, it asks the question, or you answer the question, why? And it's that third one where you're really moving towards pulling together the threads about purpose. But it's like stepping stones. To get to purpose, you've got to basically talk about the message first. What is the message? So let's take a look. Okay, so first of all, that paragraph that is showing own knowledge and putting the source into context. This is where you're showing an awareness of what the source is about. So it's a propaganda poster produced by the government's war propaganda. Now, the first sentence is just pretty much copying out what it says with the source, but that's fine. It gets your answer going, it gets it moving. Probably produced in late 1914 or early 1915. Now, there's an inference. What you're doing in question 1, you're applying those skills in it. It's that point in the war when the government needed volunteer soldiers early on, so there's good own knowledge. Why did they need volunteer soldiers? Because of the British Expeditionary Force had been defeated at the Battle of the Marne in autumn of 1914. The 2 sides have dug themselves into trenches. It's now a war of attrition, and it's now the only tactic is wave after wave of soldiers over the top. Volunteers are needed. So you've helped explain the purpose of the source using your own knowledge. That's why it's really important to write that initial paragraph. It doesn't need to be that long, but again, getting some precise knowledge in is really, really is important. Now you then get into the second paragraph, which, remember, the second paragraph is focusing in on what is the message. So it is what and how. Remember, just pull back so you can see what we wrote over there, what and how that we're doing there. So the message of this propaganda poster very clearly, opening sentence, the message is that men should volunteer to join the army. If you didn't, you will disappoint your girlfriend or wife or mother. The message is put across by placing the word go in bold capitals, and it's underlining that. So again, notice how it's really picking out the details in the source. You're applying those same skills that you used in question 1. The picture shows a family looking lovingly at a group of soldiers who've enlisted and are on their way to the Western Front. So again, really important, as you do with question 1, you pick out those little details and put them into that paragraph. So there's a lot of inferring and backing up with evidence going on in there. And you then move to the final paragraph, which is really, really focusing in on the purpose, which is what the question is asking you to make several points on. So the purpose of the overall purpose is to persuade as many men as possible to volunteer to fight against Germany. Words in red are own knowledge all the way through. So again, you keep putting in own knowledge on the Western Front. A secondary purpose, so very clearly you've shown the examiner, I've noticed more than one purpose. Okay, the first purpose is to focus on men. So when you're talking about purpose, think of your audience, and there can be more than one audience. Okay, in this case, the first audience are men, the second audience is women. So it's got different purposes depending on who is looking at the picture. A secondary purpose would be to persuade women to put pressure on their husbands and sons to go and fight. We know this happened because women gave men white feathers. In the longer term, these sorts of conscience posters, that's what this propaganda poster is called, a conscience poster, good knowledge, put it in. Remember, you've got to show own knowledge to attract a sufficient number of volunteers to overcome the stalemate on the Western Front. The British strategy was to break through the enemy lines by sending as many men as possible over the top in a war of attrition that would break the morale of the German soldiers. So a very, very strong answer that, because it's well structured, it shows how the message is put across, it shows what the message is, it explains why the message was put across to two different audiences, men and women, and there's lots of own knowledge which is shown in red. Now there's a second in this podcast, it's another one for you to look through. I'll quickly take you through the key points, but you can pretty much see exactly the same techniques applied here. It's perhaps not quite as strong an answer as the previous one, but nevertheless it would probably access at least 7 of the 8 marks. So the question is, how does this advertisement get its message across? So it's an advertisement from World War II, and it's how does this advertisement get its message across about the role of women during World War II. Slightly different focus to the question here. So you may want to pause the podcast here at this point and just have a look at that. Again, if you go to Frog, you'll see the source and you'll be able to read the cartoon and get a sense of the details and what the story is. I'm not going to take you through that now. I'm just going to move down to the model answer, just again so you get that immediate sense of structure. So you've got, again, a simple sentence at the beginning about putting the source into context. You've got, and that's where it would lose marks. There's not really enough own knowledge there. Just another couple of sentences that applies a bit of own knowledge. Yeah, even if it just put the dates of World War II, 1939 to 45 in there, or said something about the role of women in World War II, it would give a bit more context to it. That's the weakness. But then you've got a strong second paragraph, and as you can see, it clearly talks about what is the message. The message is women can still serve their country and at the same time be a good wife. Notice how there's lots of inferences going on in there. The advert suggests that, for example, just like in question 1, so it backs it up with a detail. And then again, the advert's message is that, and then it backs it up with a detail. And it looks at the language. It's put across using a simple storyline drawn as a cartoon strip. It's a bit like the GCSE English language. Talk about the way in which the message is put across. So remember, that paragraph is what and how. And then the final paragraph is why. So the overall purpose, use the word purpose. Okay, that's what the question is asking you. What's the purpose? The overall purpose is to sell more puddings and to promote a message. there is another purpose, okay? So clearly you're saying there's one purpose and there's a second purpose. Okay, try to find at least two different points that answer the question, which is boosting the confidence of women. So 2 examples there. The first one is the strongest, but they're both good answers. Hopefully that will help you with question 2, which is about the purpose of a representation.